conversation, that is always an option as well. So I think it'll be worth going into it.
Yeah.
I guess let's first update with a couple of announcements that I think most of you are aware of, but the retreat is over halfway full. And it's not even July yet, so that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
You all probably also got the announcement in your social media and even on the podcast that we now have an event planned in Bowling Green. Probably none of you that have joined us tonight are going to be joining us in Bowling Green, but
if you know friends in Bowling Green,
yeah, you have friends in Bowling Green or that region, certainly reach out and let them know. You can get that registration info on our social media and even on our website. So looking to included in that is we're not just doing a marriage seminar, we're also doing a singles event as well.
I'm super excited about that being right there by Western. And it will be after, they're back in session. And so hoping that will be a great turnout with, more of a college age crowd. Certainly high schoolers are going to be welcome to come to that, but we're really trying to target more young people, college age type things. So that could be a good thing. We're looking forward to that.
We'll be talking about sexuality in your singleness and purposeful dating, that sort of thing. So that's our plan.
Yeah. So our big thing this week with Covenant Club is, I don't know if y'all saw, but we released an extended podcast segment on Covenant Club, and it's in the form of a video of us recording the podcast. So a lot of recording equipment, and
it's like podcast inception. It's
like
video of an audio recording, something like that.
It was we could definitely set the camera angle up a little bit better. I watched it back and I'm like, that was horrible, but okay. We got to start somewhere.
Right.
Did you post it on? That's something you should post online somewhere, just to tease it out there.
That's part of the plan. I want to just.
We need a better one. I don't want to post that
I'm
one.
going to pull out some segments. Jen's going to get over it. We're going to pull out some segments and post them on social media to tease a little bit. But the benefit of the video is that you don't have to listen to any ads. So that's
because our ads are so annoying. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, they are annoying. That's part of the point.
But we do have so we're trying to start doing periodically for our Covenant Club members. Anytime that we have more material than what we would cover in the podcast, than just kind of doing some extended material for Covenant Club members.
Yeah. So there's about 10 or 12 minutes at the end. It's not in the published podcast. That is just a little bit more in-depth conversation about the topic. And really, even though this episode does get kind of personal with us, it does sort of take the conversation a little bit more personally and a little bit deeper. So that's the benefit of that. So you can find that, Covenant Club members can find that in the multimedia, same region of the Covenant Club where you found the webinar. And then in that is there's an icon that says bonus content.
Bright red letters, you can't
miss it. So check there and that'll get you the link to the extended content.
Yeah. One of the other things we have in the works is that we're going to start sending out a weekly newsletter to your emails. So you do have to, I guess, check your emails. But the weekly newsletter is going to kind of start highlighting what's happening on Covenant Club. Just so, not everybody is in the habit of maybe checking Covenant Club. So the weekly newsletter would help okay, here's the things that are going on. We're going to also do some other things in the newsletter, life with Matt and Jen kind of deal, maybe a little date night segment or something
maybe
like that.
Maybe some photos from date night, what are we eating this week and
who knows
what we do,
but one of the things we really want to include in that weekly newsletter is the weekly challenges. And we were interested in knowing, those of you that are on here, Like, do you use those weekly challenges that we put out? And if not, like what kind of gets in the way of accessing the weekly challenges that we try to put out? We try to put them out every Monday morning.
Try is the operative word, but
yes,
we're
missed a couple of weeks with COVID,
yes.
but anyhow. So yeah, we would love to hear y'all's thoughts on what the weekly challenges like. Is that a good idea? Is it not? Is it hard to access? Is it hard to think about?
Yeah, and negative feedback is perfectly good, because if we're working too hard at something that nobody cares about, then we don't want to keep working at it, obviously.
Right.
I wish you could text it. I wish there was a way to like everybody who's on Covenant Club, you had their phone number, and then like I don't think so.
No, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
And then it like auto texted us. Like you could send it out and just text it to the whole group somehow. Because I think that if I'm like riding in a car and it's like, oh, boom, here's the question, then I can like show it to her. Here's the question. But I feel like when I see it online, like, oh, that's interesting. But then like we never talk about it. So
yeah, that's fair.
Okay. That I have no idea what would be involved. Maybe some more technical people would, if there's a way to do like a bulk text message. Is there a
got to be a plug-in? It's got to
There
be a plug-in
is.
for that.
I don't know what the web service you're using. I guess I could talk to Brent or Jacob about that. But if it's Wix, there is a way to do that through Wix. I've done it with my website.
I know there's a way to do it, but
there is a way.
Okay.
It's
Well,
the
we'll
same
look
as
into
sending
that.
out a blast email.
you should talk to your website guy about that.
Yeah. Do you know a good website guy? I mean, I get plenty of texts from different companies, so
There's got to be a something that you can do with that.
Yeah, I just don't know what it would cost, what it would be involved in setting that up. So
Generally, those are free. They're free plugins.
Oh, wow.
Generally.
Okay.
Wow. Well, because that makes sense. It's hard. I think that's the downside of Covenant Club is it's sometimes it's separate from everything else, and it's hard to remember to go to it.
Mhm.
I think that's what we're kind of finding for a lot of people. The idea is great, but it's hard to remember to access.
Oh, and for me too, even me personally. I mean, if I'm not getting a reminder,
Yeah.
because we don't even, it's not even an app at this point, so I'm not even
Right.
getting the little red badge to tell me that there's something waiting for me.
Right. And what I've done is I've just set it up like this is my social media folder, and so I have the icon right there. But so that when I go to see Facebook or Instagram, I'm like, oh, I could also check Covenant Club.
That's fine.
So that at least puts it like within my social media folder, realm. But that doesn't necessarily, you still have to click on it.
Right.
So, anyhow.
So the newsletter, we felt like was at least one way to get it into people's hands more readily.
Right.
So
we'll see if that gets anywhere.
The other thing we wanted to mention and just remind you all of is if you are a platinum member, then we owe you or will owe you shortly a prepare enrich assessment. If you're not familiar with what that is, we're going to give you a lot more details to come, but
we're making a video that will be sent out to everybody that are platinum members about what the prepare enrich assessment is, what it means, how to access it, and all of that.
Right, and accompanying that assessment will be a video series to explain how to interpret the report that you get back. Anyway, more information about that to come, but we just wanted to throw that out there and so you guys know what to look for.
We had it listed as a benefit of being a platinum member, so we just want to make sure that our platinum members know we're working on that.
Yes,
we're trying. We came up with this huge list of what Covenant Club was going to offer, and then we're like, we have to actually offer that. So extended content happened this week, and I totally surprised Matt because on Sunday I'm like, set up the camera, we're going to film this one, we're going to do extended content, and he was like, wow, okay. So we're getting there. We're slowly but surely going to figure this out.
Right.
All right.
So there were two things at least that were posted ahead of time in terms of topics that you all wanted to cover. So I wanted to prioritize that. We have a whole list of Q&A or other questions that we get from time to time that we can always go to, but I at least wanted to prioritize these two questions or comments anyway. The first one was a comment from Melissa Bullard, who I guess is not joining us now, probably maybe will join us later when the kids are in bed. At the very least, Melissa, if you're watching this later, we wanted to acknowledge her comment. And the comment was, maybe I'm summarizing this wrong, but that she had been challenging herself to do some things more intentionally. And
yeah, and one of those was, and I loved this idea, as part of her kind of monthly intentionality challenge, she put on her list to intentionally smile and kiss her husband. And I just really love the thought of, and she said it took 60 seconds. And I think there's so many times that we get to the end of the day and you think, did we even like intentionally make eye contact? Did we smile at one another? Or did we just kind of coexist in a house together? Did we, two ships passing in the night kind of deal?
Right.
And so I appreciate that, that Melissa threw that out there for us. And I think that's a great challenge for all of us, like to just be more intentional thinking, have I smiled and have I kissed? And I love how she said that her husband, Alex, like by a couple of weeks in was just like beaming because he knew it was coming, when she would smile. And again, it only took 60 seconds to 2 minutes, she said. And, that seems so easy. Why is it not that easy? But
right.
So kudos to her.
Yeah.
And maybe the challenge is out there for all the rest of us.
Yeah. And I would add to that there's plenty of data to demonstrate that even just making an effort to increase the amount of eye contact that you are making with your spouse through the day will exponentially improve your assessment of your marriage and your spouse's assessment of your marriage and relationship as well. You don't have to do anything except just make more eye contact and you will both feel more connected.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a conversation about it. You don't have to do anything else about it. It will improve the degree of connectivity that you're feeling. So it's a cheater's way to improve your relationship. Now, is it going to solve all your problems? Of course not, but it is a way to improve things. But I love how Melissa has taken this a step further in promoting the smile. So eye contact and a smile, eye contact and a smile and a kiss. Again, like Jen's saying, those are simple things that you can do that can definitely have a significantly positive benefit. So thanks, Melissa, for bringing that up. I think that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, and maybe we all challenge ourselves to do that, and come July webinar, we can check in and say, did you do it? How'd it go?
Challenge. Right. Okay, so the other question that was left on the webinar forum, sorry,
an anonymous submission.
It was an anonymous question, which is, and I'll just read it because not everybody made it there. The comment is, so oral sex comes up at various times on the podcast. You don't say. For whatever reason, grooming, trimming, or otherwise preparing for that seems like an uncomfortable topic. It's not that it is necessarily gross or anything. It's just, I can't imagine that anyone wants that, quote, I can't get the hair out of my mouth feeling during sex. Are there other reasons why this would be good? Are there reasons you should not do this? What's the solution, and how can this not be a weird conversation? So Jen immediately asks, like, the questioner says, seems like it's an uncomfortable topic. And she asks, does she mean uncomfortable for us to talk about?
Right. I was like, does this person think this is uncomfortable for us to talk about because we haven't really talked about this yet? And Matt, of course, is like, nothing is uncomfortable for us to talk about. And I'm like, everything is uncomfortable for us to talk about, one side of this equation, and yet here we are. So there's a little glimpse into the dynamics of Matt and Jim.
That said, it might be an uncomfortable topic for someone. I mean, who knows? I don't know. I don't know who submitted this or under what the circumstances are, but I guess, and that was kind of the first thing that I grabbed onto when I read this post, which was what makes this topic uncomfortable. And I think that's probably the place that this conversation should start with this couple.
Right.
Well, even introspectively, is why do I feel like this topic is uncomfortable?
Right.
What is it about my understanding of sexuality, or my understanding of my body, or my spouse's body, or what is it that makes this uncomfortable? Or maybe is it uncomfortable because I'm uncomfortable asking my spouse to do something about this?
Right. I was going to say, like, when I read this, I think a lot of that uncomfortableness can be coming from a place of, I would like my spouse to pay more attention to their physical hygiene and to consider, grooming and trimming. But how do I say to my spouse, hey, can we look into this, without it feeling like a criticism to our spouses?
Sure.
And so I think that, it's fair to acknowledge that there is a level of delicacy that's needed in starting this conversation.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's one thing to tell your spouse, hey, I'm going to start doing this. It's another thing to say, hey, I think you should do something about this. Or maybe we could talk about or consider doing something about this. That's a different kind of conversation. Right. So yes, I think there's always a level of discomfort when you're approaching something that's not the status quo.
Right. And for some people, I mean, the question says, it's not that it's necessarily gross or anything, but for some people, there is a gross factor. There is a disgust that needs to get, moved past. And that's fair to acknowledge. Some of us are going to just by nature lean more towards the, disgust factor when it comes to, what's going on down there. And a lot of that has to do with, what was your family of origin? How comfortable, was the subject about bodies in the family that you grew up in? And if everything about your body is treated with a sense of shame and uncomfortableness, then that's probably by nature kind of where you reside.
Oh, sure. Well, and some of it's just innate. I mean, that's why some of us grow up to become veterinarians and others grow up to become preachers. I mean, so
some can handle the world of disgusting things a lot better.
Yeah, some things just don't bother one or other, and there's obviously some personal preference.
Not that we're throwing any preacher we know under a bus.
I don't even know any preachers.
Okay.
I'm definitely not on board for seeing the inside of animals. No thanks.
So it's not for everybody. That's fair, and nor am I advocating that everyone should be at the same place there. But
lean into why you already said this. Lean into why is it uncomfortable to me if it's that I'm uncomfortable considering my own body, and maybe lean into the possibility that it may feel gross to my spouse. We might have to work through that immediate disgust reaction.
Yeah, what's easy for me, it may not be easy for my spouse, and vice versa.
Right.
So that it does take some level of empathy to have a conversation like this, to recognize where it's coming from. But that's where the conversation needs to go, is if my spouse has a hang up, let's talk about that, and why is there a hang up, and why do I have this hang up, and what the other part of this, I think always needs to be a part of the conversation of, if I want something that is different in my relationship, whatever it is, I need to not just make the request or demand, as it were, but I need to also come at this from the standpoint of trying to explain the why. Mm-hmm. The conversation does not need to be about what, because the what of the conversation is immaterial, really, and irrelevant until or unless my spouse can understand why it's important.
Right. So I think it's good then to like talk about like what would be the whys of, you know, personal trimming and grooming. I mean, and the question itself kind of implies that one of the whys would just be nobody likes a mouthful of hair. So
Unless that's your
well
thing.
stated. Sure. Okay. We'll go with that. There's somebody has a thing for everything. Yeah. All right.
So who am I to judge? But
so obviously then one of the first pros and one of the reasons that most people would want to consider this is just making it easier to enjoy oral sex or to give oral sex.
yeah, well, maybe let's back up and even let's talk about how is this accomplished?
Okay.
Okay, before we get into pros and cons, let's at least, because I before we get there, we need to at least acknowledge that there are some different methods for making this happen, because not everybody's there. So, and I think more maybe looking at this from a broader standpoint than what even the questioner is asking is, the questioner is asking about grooming and trimming and preparing. So I think that involves more than just doing something with the hair necessarily. I think there's also the component of just the cleanliness or hygiene, as it were, that impacts. Sorry, the dog is just gonna have to go. Okay, sorry about that. But so I think it's before we talk about doing something with hair, I think there's this component of cleanliness at least, and I know that generally, at least for women, there's much more concern for women for their own fragrances and odors that may be going on down there. Women at least tend to be more self-conscious about that. Maybe men are too, I don't know, but that at least seems to be the case. So there certainly are products available for cleaning, but sometimes just soap and water is perfectly acceptable for that reason. But there is a reason, at least in terms of preparing for oral sex, that at least being clean can make it easier both for the giver and the receiver. And especially if the woman is the receiver, it can make her feel less self-conscious about the odors.
Well, and that gets into that disgust. I mean, have a conversation where you know what are the triggers that might be sending one or both of you into, you know, more like feeling grossed out or disgusted. Yeah.
And to take it a step further, certainly there are some men or women who, when they give oral sex, are disgusted not just by the fragrance, but sometimes by the tastes. And there are products, there's plenty of flavored lubricants out there that work very well at masking some of those flavors, scents, tastes, whatever. So just some things to think about, at least some options, at least. Now, in terms of dealing with the hair that is there, obviously there are multiple methods of dealing with that, whether you're talking about just a plain old razor like you would shave your face with, or legs, for those of you that do that. Those methods work, that tool works just as well to shave and trim other body parts. Obviously, there are risks when you put sharp objects near delicate areas of your body, so some caution is important. But there are also electric trimmers. Just like you would shave your hair, or
you say the word trimmer and I picture like a weed whacker, so I'm sorry.
No, that
like that to me is the word trimmer. That's what that goes with. A yard crew. Maybe it's because I hear a yard crew out our window.
Yeah,
but okay, keep going.
Sounds like a terrible option.
Yes. So when we're talking about trimmer,
I'm talking like clippers to clip your hair with, and they make these specifically for the below the belt regions, either as a trimmer like clippers or as actual shavers. And I'm sure some of those work better than others. And if you're anywhere on social media right now, you probably have gotten an ad for the newest one that's on the market called Manscaped. There's this big push now.
That's a whole company.
It's a whole
Called
company.
Manscaped.
Manscaped. They have a whole line of products for all of these things, including like deodorant for your below the belt regions. I don't know how or why that's necessary, but they've got it out there. So those are certainly options. And then of course there is waxing. Lots of women wax their eyebrows and their faces and other parts, and I guess men do this too as well. But it's also a method for waxing the so-called bikini areas, and there are men and women who have that done as well. That's probably something that is maybe a little bit more challenging to do to yourself. I don't know, never tried, but I'm sure there are people who have, but I don't have any experience with waxing, so I'm not going to comment. So what are the pros? So you mentioned one of the benefits of at least trimming in particular is it just provides easier access. And if there's not hair in the way of parts, it's easier to get there, and it's probably more pleasant or more comfortable for the giver to access those parts if there's not hair in the way. So that obviously is a benefit.
Right. And I think also the benefit for the receiver is that there's a different sensation.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's difference, not just with oral sex, but any sexual stimuli is going to feel different when you remove the hair.
Right. And that's, I would say, not just the receiver, or not just the giver, but also the receiver. It's a different sensation for each of you when the hair is removed. So not that it's necessarily better or worse, but it's different. Mm-hmm. And sometimes different is worth just being different. So whatever it is, whether we're talking about hair or not. So not only it's a different sensation, it's a new sensation, but I would say even for the receiver, if you remove hair, wherever it is, it's also going to be a different sensation during daily activity, which sometimes could be a benefit because it's going to continually remind you of what's going on, and just something else to move your mind in the direction of sexuality for some of us could be of benefit. Remind us of our beloved, remind us of what's going on down there, and remind us of our sexuality. So sometimes that also could be a benefit. Again, male or female, that could be of some benefit.
And I think another possible benefit is especially for someone who might be triggered, disgust might be triggered by odors. Hair is just naturally going to trap odors. And so removing that might help reduce odor, which might then make, things more comfortable for one or both of you.
Yeah. So maybe it's debatable maybe whether that does actually reduce odors, but if it makes you feel like it does, then maybe it does. So we'll go with that.
I think the biggest probably is just the novelty of it. There's a reason it does feel like a little bit of an uncomfortable topic, because it feels like, at least the perception is, this isn't the norm. Mm-hmm. And so anytime you introduce something that has an element of novelty to it, that can be a huge pro. It can be a huge con, depending on whether that's something you want or not. Novelty can it shakes things up. Some of us, it gives us a lot of anxiety. Some of us, it gives us a lot of pleasure. So, yeah. But just the novelty of it can be a big pro.
But new does not necessarily mean better, because what if it's new because it gives you razor burn and you're miserable all day? Well, that's obviously not a great new feeling. So that's obviously something to consider. But maybe that's a good segue into the cons. Unless somebody want to comment on other potential benefits.
That's right.
I'm just enjoying watching the two of you talk about this. So continue on.
I'm so glad somebody asked this question.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
I'm trying hard not to make faces, so it's great. It's especially great because the only faces looking back at me are our personal friends. So it's really actually making it way more awkward. I'm mostly just looking at him. Like, love y'all.
I didn't.
But someone asked the question, and we are going to honor whatever person asked that
That's
question. We will answer it.
Um,
They're probably not even on here. Who
yeah,
knows?
they weren't gonna. They
They're
weren't
like,
sit.
what's the most awkward question I can throw at Matt and Jen? I'm not even going to sign on. We'll see. That's all right. We are not uncomfortable, right? We're claiming that we're not uncomfortable.
You keep telling yourself that.
Okay.
Nobody can tell.
Not uncomfortable. Keep going. What are the cons,
Okay.
Matt?
Well, I think one important con or negative aspect of this is, at least for some, there may be some stigma associated with this practice.
Well, and I think it's fair to recognize that, especially there has been a huge rise in the popularity of women being fully waxed as porn has grown, because this is one of the things that porn introduced. And porn made it very popular and made it seem like it's very norm for a woman to be completely hairless, and that equals hairless, yeah. Right, and that equals somehow the epitome of being extremely sexual and sexy. And so I think it's fair to ask whoever it is that's interested in this, like, what's my reason and where's it coming from? Where's the desire for it? Sadly, one of the things that porn really did with connecting that idea of women being hairless was they were tying it to a juvenile appearance and hypersexualizing, looking like a very young girl. And so it's fair to just acknowledge that is tied to it. It may not be your reason.
Potentially, right.
Yeah, I mean, it may not be why you have it tied to it, but it is a part of why it has become something that's much more popular.
That said, well, it's hard to say where the practice originated or why the practice originated or why it has become popular, because I don't know that that's even something that could be easily quantified or studied. But it definitely is clear that the practice became very popular. I shouldn't even be saying this, but it became very popular because prostitutes in not the terribly distant past were trying to avoid catching and spreading pubic lice, or crabs as they're called. So that's why the practice became popular, and that's how it became introduced more mainstream into society.
Learn something new every day.
I don't know. I don't even know where I learn these things or why, but or why I hang on to them. But anyway, so again, I just say that because it's still associated with that stigma.
Right, and that may not be your why. It's just fair to acknowledge that stigma is there.
Brent says maybe there is a timeline.
We're at church last night when you talked about timeline. Thank you for not putting this timeline on the overhead.
I'm going to leave that for you all to research on your own time. I am not researching that or publishing that timeline. But that could be an interesting study. Anyway, there is stigma associated with this practice, and some of it may be justified. Some of it may just simply be it's a stigma because even if there is this loose association with porn, that's something that I, as a husband or wife, feel uncomfortable with, so I don't want any part of it. Or it makes me uncomfortable because it might have some loose association. So again, if that's your objection, that's your objection, but you still have to have a conversation about that with your spouse if that's something that they're asking for. Let's talk about maybe some, in terms of the practicality of it, what are some of the downsides to this? And I think one of them is that it's something that would require regular attention. Like if you don't have a beard, then you have to shave. If you don't want to have a beard, you have to shave if you're a man. And so if you don't want to have hair, then you're going to have to do something to eliminate it.
Well, and depending on what you do to eliminate it, that may cause the hair to grow back either finer or coarser. You know, if you're shaving, then it's going to grow back in the form of stubble, and that might be a much more miserable, thing than just having it uncut.
Having sandpaper down there is probably worse than having hair down there. So that's something you have to consider, right? The other concern is if you're using razors or trimmers or anything down in that region, number one, there's the risk of getting cut. So that doesn't sound pleasant. And there is the risk of razor burn. If your razor or trimmer is removing too much of not just removing the hair, but removing some of the skin, not necessarily making a cut, but making razor burn, that's also something that could be uncomfortable. Or if you're just prone to sensitive skin and perhaps some of the products that you use irritate your skin or whatever it might be, again, also something to consider. And then, finding the right products can be a challenge, whatever that is. And there are so many different products out there, whether it's just a Bic razor or whether it's an electric trimmer or a shaver or whatever it might be. You've got to find a product that is going to work for you, and that may take some time and experimenting, and maybe you're not into experimenting in that way. So again,
well, and if you're talking about waxing, I mean, like you so eloquently stated, that might not be something that's like a self thing. And so then you're going to need to go to a place, and then you've got to decide, am I comfortable with that? I mean, we all say, okay, I'm comfortable with a doctor. I'm comfortable with that kind of professional. You got to decide, am I comfortable with a professional whose job it is to help remove hair from my body in sensitive places? And so that's obviously going to be a huge consideration, and finding the right place and the right person, and whether or not that's okay with you or not. So those are our cons. Okay. So we've taken up almost this whole hour with this topic, which was not our intention. But here we are nevertheless. Well, but hopefully, I mean, I think we, as we end everything, it's always have the conversation. So like, what's the solution, and how can this not be a weird conversation? Well, it's a weird conversation if you make it a weird conversation.
No, it's going to be.
I've tried very hard to not make this a weird conversation.
It might be a weird conversation depending on the degree of intimate conversations like this that you've had maybe in the past. But
I think every couple should have this conversation.
You should be having weird conversations.
You might come to the conclusion that, hey, what it is we're doing is just fine with both of us. But you might actually find out that one of you is maybe not as fine. Maybe one of you does want, so lean into the weird conversations. Mm-hmm. Let me lead the way for you. Lean into weird conversations.
And having that conversation, you might learn some new things, and that's always good for you.
Yeah.
All right. I don't think we have enough time to jump into another topic.
Yeah, that was the only question that really came in. We had a couple of other questions we could have dived into, just to kind of get like y'all's feedback on how we answered things. But
any other comments?
Yeah.
Questions?
No, because that
Jokes?
was an awkward conversation, and none of them want to talk to us now.
That's fair. They probably won't want to talk to us on Sunday either.
That's probably true. Welcome to our life. I know y'all are all so jealous that this is somehow weirdly what we do. We are not uncomfortable.
And you
That's
do
what
it
the
very
lesson-
well. You do it very well.
Now I kind of want to know what your other questions were that you were going to talk about.
We kind of really wanted to just.
You're gonna have to just keep tuning in.
Well then.
No, actually, we did want to talk a little bit more about our recent podcast episode, and get some feedback about that. But we'll go there. Maybe we'll save that for next time.
July.
For July. That'll give everybody a chance to actually listen to the episode, because probably not everybody's listened to 97 yet.
The one from Monday?
From Monday.
Yeah. And I think our next webinar is going to be Thursday, July 7th. The rest of July is crazy busy for us, including one of those weeks we will be in St. Lucia celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary.
Woo!
Will not be doing a webinar with people. We could do a webinar from St. Lucia.
Think about how amazing that would look if you did it from there.
It would be an amazing setting, but you're not invited.
That's right.
We might record a podcast from there.
Yeah,
That
we'll
could
see.
be fun.
We'll see.
Yeah. Talk
It'd be
about
hard
like,
to set up the video there
perspective.
though, unless you brought other stuff with you. So
Yeah, we could just record it on a phone. Make it like wouldn't be too
It wouldn't be
as
that bad.
professional, but that could be fun. We'll see. But anyhow, Thursday, July 7th, I think would be probably where we're gonna land our next webinar, and we'll probably do it as Zoom again. Maybe we'll try to find a topic that's a little bit less awkward
More
so that
discussion
we
friendly.
can actually have a discussion, because this is a little bit of an awkward one to discuss. But again, that said, I mean, I just appreciate that someone wanted to ask that question and felt safe asking that question here. And that's what this is all about.
Right. That's right.
And you know, I want to make sure, and I'll say it here, I know that you guys that are on here right now know it, but for those that might watch this back, anonymous questions are always welcome on Covenant Club. Like, we want Covenant Club to be a place where we have discussions, but it is completely okay if you're like, I need to put this out here, but I don't need my name associated with it.
Yeah. Or even anonymous feedback. If you
Yeah.
have an answer to a question or
yeah.
comment to somebody else's question, you don't have to post your name. Just post it anonymously if you don't
Yeah.
want to get personally involved or whatever.
Right. And we love our lurkers too. Anybody that's just out there to read and not necessarily comment and offer to the conversation, that's okay too. We'll take you however you come.
That's right. All right. Anybody want the last word?
I'm just wondering how the content is going for the retreat. If you have an update.
Well, no, because we got sick, and the weekend we got sick was supposed to be our planning weekend, but
So-
we do have that rescheduled.
That's right.
So we've got a couple of days coming up where we are going to seclude ourselves and get a lot of that done. That said, the topic of episode 97
Yeah, this week's podcast.
is sort of a preview, put it that way. It is a little bit of a preview of what we're going to be trying to cover sort of as a whole, and maybe even boil down that specific topic into one session of the retreat. So I guess there is an update, at least in that regard, but we're going to have, hopefully by the end of our planning weekend, we'll have all of the topics laid out. We'll have all of the material at least outlined, so that we can give everybody a much more specific idea of what we're going to cover and what to look forward to.
That's coming.
Thanks for the question. That's a good one.
Yeah. Spread the word about the retreat. We're excited about it this year.
How many people do you have? Are a lot of the people coming from other places, or is it like?
We have a
Yeah.
lot of people coming from other places. Yeah. And a lot of people that we don't know at all. So that's super exciting. I mean, you know, we are up against the Florida College Leadership Dinner. And so we have a pretty big handful of people that unfortunately need to go to that and therefore can't be at the retreat. So next year, we're going to make sure that those two things don't happen on the same weekend.
Yeah, but one of our most recent registrants is from Missouri, near
Yeah.
St. Louis. So
Yeah. So we have several people that are traveling.
from pretty good distance.
When's the Bowling Green event?
The
22nd. Hold on. I get the dates so mixed up because we've done it 22nd through the 24th. It's
Of
always
what month?
September, the retreat.
No, the Bowling Green event.
It's like,
the Bowling
you
Green.
don't know the event?
Bowling Green is
August 27th is the marriage day, Saturday, August 27th.
Oh, okay.
And we'll be speaking for the to the singles on Friday, the 26th.
Okay.
But really, honestly, I mean, there's the potential that people that are that bad, if we're not sold out by that point, they could maybe hop into the retreat, but we'll see. That's really right on top of.
Yeah, it's like a month out. So.
Yeah, and we closed retreat registration September 1st for the hotel's sake. So, but anyhow, we've got, it's very common that the month of July is when the retreat sells out and fills up. And so we expect that. And if not, we're good. Whoever comes. It'll be great. It'll be fun. We're excited.
great. Good to see you guys tonight. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for participating. Hope it wasn't too awkward for everybody. Get included. We'll look forward to doing this again next month.
Thank you,
All right.
guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Good night,
Have a
everybody.
good night.
Good night.